Here now was a village. The man drove his dogs out of the fog, the great gray dogs out of the gray fog, as if the dogs were not animals but fog that had come alive. Out they came onto a clearing on top of a bluff overlooking a coastal village, and the man set his bone snow hook. There were many skin tents along the beach ice, each tent by a meat rack filled with black blood meat from walrus and seal. Steam from the heat was coming from the breathing holes of the tents, and though it was dim, he saw children playing with puppies near the tents. It was a good camp. All the puppies were fat, and the dogs had good hair and were fat. In the dream, Russell could see over the man, could see how his mind was working, and he knew that the man was holding back above the village out of sadness. The camp was nothing, he knew, but the playing children and the sounds of women calling to each other through the tent walls made him think of the family he had left when he'd gone to hunt. He was in a new land, but the people were known to him as all people are known to all other people. And their words made him think of his own family, and he missed them. And for a moment, Russell thought he might turn the team and head for home with the red meat and yellow fat. But the dogs were excited, and they jerked the snow hook free and tore down the hill with the ivory and bone sled flying behind like a feather in the wind. They wanted to meet the new dogs and perhaps fight and breed and eat and rest, and they pulled the man down into the settlement on the beach. Everybody came running out of the tents, half-dressed, yelling at the dogs to stop them from fighting, for the man's dogs were among the loose village dogs, snapping and barking, the sled behind them. After much whipping and yelling, the dogs were separated. There was great joy in the village. Villagers came very seldom, and strangers almost never. The man had come from far away. They knew that from which were of a strange bloodline, and he was surely a mighty hunter, because his sled was full of meat, and his dogs were sleek and well fed, even though they had come a long distance. The new man would have stories to tell, wonderful stories of taking the large beast and traveling through strange lands. They would show the stranger their hospitality by feeding him much fat meat and feeding his dogs until they threw the meat up to eat it again. Then they would take him into the main tent, and they would talk, and perhaps later they would sing and dance to the drum and make up songs. Perhaps the stranger would sing his song. It would be a night to last many days, with eating and eating until nothing more could be put down. A great time. A new folding. When it cleared, Russell was inside a great tent. There were many people in the tent, sitting around the outside in a circle with the women back on a ledge. There were a dozen or so lamps burning so that their light made their tent bright, hot yellow with hazy smoke, and in the middle of the tent, with his back to Russell, stood the man who had come on the sled with the great gray dogs. He wore only a bleached clout, held by a thin leather thong, and Russell could see the knotted muscles on his back and down his legs, cords of power. His skin shone with sweat and grease from rubbing his hands on his body to clean them while he ate, and his hair hung down in straight lines, heavy with grease. He is not a man standing on the ground, Russell thought. He is growing up from the ground. His legs are the earth, and they take strength from it, up through his ankles and into his muscles, so that he grows with what he takes from it. More than strength, more than substance, all that the man would be is growing up from the earth through his legs and into his body. Strong. Strong beyond what he was merely. The man had grown strong from the dogs and the wind and the winter, and strong from the people around in a circle who watched now, watched and waited. The man kept his back to Russell, but Russell knew why and didn't care. He knew that he was the man, knew it, and let the knowledge carry him into the man. And now the man started to move. His legs shuffled, and his head swung from side to side, and his hair moved with his body, and he was not a man anymore. He was the mammoth. It was more than a dance, more than a story. He became the mammoth, down to the smell, the foul smell that came from the beast. The man moved, and the mammoth moved, and the people swept back to avoid being trampled, moved back in fear, and some children who had no manners cried out in fear that the beast would see them. But there was sadness here. For the mammoth knew that he must die, knew that he must furnish meat for the man, and so he knew he must run down the lance and give his death for food. There was sadness in the dance, in his movement. The man sang, and Russell could not understand the words, but he knew their meaning. It was the song of the beast, the mammoth song as he moved to his death at the hands of the puny man with the dogs. It was a noble song, a song to proclaim that he did not really have to die, but chose to because it was his time and he would die with rightness, die correctly. Sadness. A rich sadness that took the man and made everybody watching feel deeply for the plight of the mammoth, cursed to death to make meat. But now there was something new. Now the mammoth grew, took strength and rage. Around the circle the man moved, danced, his voice growing through the song of the mammoth as it first saw the dogs and man. And in the way of such things it had to attack. There was no sense to it because the mammoth could have kept going away. But the beast turned. In rage it attacked the dogs and turned its head to hit them and ran upon the lance. Sometimes the man would be wrong, and the lance would miss or hit the shoulder and slide off to the side, and the man would die, would be trampled to death. Then it was not the time for the mammoth to die, but time for the man to die. And Russell knew this, knew all of this, because of the movements of the man in the dream. Now he changed again, and now he was himself, the man, dancing and moving to kill the mammoth. And now the beast changed, and now he ran on the lance, and now he died. And it was all in the man, and all in the people who watched, and all in the same space in the council tent, all of it. When the song was done, the children screamed for joy and hunger at the meat he had brought, and the men nodded and grunted approval at his mighty hunting, and the women moved for him to attract his eye, because he was a hunter of such stature. The man fell to the floor, exhausted, and they left him there, at the side, while somebody else rose to dance his song of a kayak and a walrus and near death in the water. And when he was done, another got up, and then another, and so the song soared on and on through day and night as the dream folded back into the fog.